It may have taken 13 years, but she finally got justice. Hello, true crimerers. This is the case of Laura Ann Wynn. Viewer discretion is advised. Laura Wynn was born on June 10th, 1960. She was born in Springfield, Missouri, and I believe her biological parents gave her up for adoption. So she was adopted into the Wynn family, and that same family had adopted another young boy. So Laura, growing up, had a brother. Now, Laura was born 3 months premature, and this did cause some issues in her life. She was born literally under 2 pounds. She would end up having a permanent blindness in one of her eyes, and she suffered from paralysis. But none of it ever really seemed to distract her or get her down. She was still determined to go about her life just like anyone else would. She did really well in school. She was really, really smart. She got very good grades. She would graduate high school, and then she would go immediately into college because she wanted to study to become a pharmacy technician or work something in the medical world. That was her dream. Unfortunately, though, Laura Wynn only got to be on Earth for 31 years because someone took her away. So Laura actually would end up becoming a pharmacy technician. And by the way, this case occurred in the little community of Poplar Bluff in Missouri. I think now in 2025, it has a small population of 15,000. And so I imagine back then in the early 90s, the population was probably much smaller than it is today. So very small little area. Laura did get one of her dream jobs as being a pharmacy technician, and she was actually working in a VA center, specifically at the John J. Pershing VA Medical Center, in which her employers would say that Laura was always, from day one, a very dependable worker. She was excellent at what she did. She was very careful, very methodical, and you could tell she also just loved doing this type of job. Something else her work would say is that she was incredibly punctual. She was someone who was always on time, and she never missed work. And if she ever had to miss work, she would call. She was incredibly responsible in that regard as well. But on May 7th, 1992, Laura did not show up for work. She did not call her work. Her work, knowing the type of person that she is, said, this is unusual, this is strange. And so they actually reached out to Laura's mom. And the mom said, I haven't heard from her or seen her either today, so I'll go to her place where she lives. So her mom travels to Laura's apartment complex. She knocks on her door. She's getting no response. She can't see or hear anything. She's concerned. And so she goes to the front office, and they have one of the people who work there will go to the apartment and unlock it for the mom. Her mom walked in on something that no parent should ever have to see. Her 31-year-old daughter was on the floor. She was completely nude except for one stocking on one of her feet, and she was very clearly deceased. They called 911, obviously, right away, and police arrive. They process this whole thing as a crime scene, obviously. They determined that there is no forced entry anywhere in this apartment. The door hadn't been kicked in, no door frames broken, no windows broken, no windows unlocked. So that really gave them the impression that either Laura just didn't lock her door that night, or she let whoever this is into the apartment. In terms of the crime scene itself, she, like I said earlier, was completely nude, and she had one stocking on her foot. The other stocking that she was wearing, the night prior, was now around her neck, in which the coroner would determine that she died from asphyxiation. She had been strangled to death with that stocking. The autopsy also showed she had quite a large hemorrhage, something behind one of her ears, and it looked like she had been struck by something kind of large, but unusual also. They didn't really necessarily recognize the shape that this wound made, but it seemed to come from something very specific. The autopsy also showed some trauma to her vaginal area, and they were able to determine that she was also raped. The apartment itself, I think they determined that it was her purse had been stolen, I believe, but nothing else appeared to have been stolen. There was also no sign of any kind of major struggle happening in the apartment. There wasn't just blood spray everywhere. There weren't things weren't knocked over. There weren't a bunch of drawers opened. It seemed like this person's goal, their motive, was to rape her and then in turn had to kill her. So they would collect the stocking, especially the one around her neck, and they would preserve it. They also found 3 other fluid DNA sources from the crime scene that did not match Laura, that they believed would match her killer. They wanted to look into what she was doing, what led up to this. The night prior, they found out that Laura had gone to a local hangout spot, kind of like a bar type thing. It was called the VFW Hall. I think it was like for veterans. Laura was seen there. She was there until about a little after 11 p.m. And while she was there, she had kind of intermingled with a few people. There was also a potential altercation she kind of had. And this verbal altercation happened between Laura and a man named Samuel Freeman. Samuel Freeman was also a regular at the Poplar Bluff VFW club. There was apparently this sort of argument with regards to the pool tables there. And there was an argument that Laura was supposed to be on the pool table next, but Samuel went on it first instead. There was also, she was accusing him of swindling the other players he was playing. He was cheating them. And that's what caused this little fight. But there wasn't like any physical contact. It wasn't like super extreme, but it was noticeable. And at approximately 11 p.m., Laura leaves the bar and she leaves alone. Everyone who was there said they saw her walking away from the bar alone. Nobody was with her. Eventually, she gets back to her apartment, and there was one witness who just so happened to be looking out their window. This was sometime around 11:30-ish p.m. They saw Laura walk up the stairs to her apartment and go inside. The same witness says that within a few seconds, there is another person, a white male, that begins to seemingly follow her up the staircase and then goes into the apartment. But the neighbor couldn't see super clearly, meaning like they didn't know if the second person rushed Laura in, like as like a sudden attack, or if he was invited in. They just couldn't really tell because it was so dark outside. There were witnesses in the apartment complex who said they think they heard some raised voices coming from the general vicinity of her apartment. So once Laura's body was found and police began to interview the neighbors, this neighbor who saw this, person, this white man walk up the stairs and follow Laura, says he could only really give a general description of the guy because he didn't see his face and it was like far away and it was dark. He could just really tell that it was a white male, and that was about it. And nothing about the situation really screamed to this neighbor like, oh my God, she's in distress, because it just looked like someone was walking in the apartment with her. Another neighbor says that sometime around 2:30 in the morning, they heard Laura's door kind of slam closed. And I think someone heard or saw someone walking away from her apartment. And so based on this information, they believe that Laura was likely killed sometime between 11:30 p.m. and 2:30 a.m. So this being 1992, there was, not the DNA technology was starting to become a bigger thing, but it was nowhere even near where we had, it today. But they did collect all the evidence, like the stocking that had potential DNA on it. There was a ripped up or wadded up piece of tissue or toilet paper that had DNA on it. There was also DNA on the stocking that was still around her foot. However, they couldn't match the DNA to anyone. And her case sadly kind of goes cold for a while. In the initial investigation, police did hear about this potential altercation or fight happening between Laura and this Samuel person. Another person says that they think that Samuel had offered to buy Laura a drink and she refuted him and said, no, that's okay. And that Samuel didn't like that. So there was a point where early on Samuel was kind of looked at as a possible suspect. They didn't know for sure. At the crime scene, they also found a couple of strands of hair. And when those strands of hair were tested, the examiner said they came from likely a black individual. Well, that didn't make sense because the individual that was seen going into the apartment was white. And so that could have just been hair from someone else, or maybe the witness got it wrong. They don't really know at that point. And they really wouldn't know until 2005. By 2005, DNA technology is way, way better, and they're able to take all of the samples they had from Laura's case, and they were able to create a male profile. The male profile was definitely of a white male. So whoever these hairs were from a black male, they don't know, but it didn't really matter because they weren't found directly on her body. Could have been, who knows, a lover, a friend, they didn't really know. They found no other fingerprints or palm prints or anything else in the crime scene, so all they had was that DNA, which DNA is a pretty strong thing to have. That DNA would end up matching a person whose name had come up. That DNA belonged to none other than Samuel Freeman. He had initially denied ever going to her apartment when they first talked to him back in the initial part of the investigation, but now they have proof that he was in her apartment. They have his DNA on multiple items, not just one thing, multiple things, including things that were involved directly in the murder, like the stalking, this tissue paper. So they knew that that DNA came from whoever raped and murdered her, and that DNA matched Samuel Freeman. One thing they could not figure out still was that injury to the back of her head or behind her ear, that very distinct kind of looking mark. They believe it came from some kind of smooth object, but they didn't know what it was. And when they enter Samuel's apartment, once they have his DNA, they're able to get a warrant to search his apartment. Lo and behold, they find something in there that kind of jumps out to them. So Samuel apparently collected beer bottles. And in particular, he liked to collect a bottle of Galliano liqueur. It's kind of like a tall, skinny type bottle. They look kind of cool. But they found I think one or two at his apartment. And when they looked at it up close, they can see in the bottle neck that this kind of was looking like the wound they found on Laura's body from behind her ear. And they also noticed when they brought it in to be, further tested, there was a tiny piece of dried blood on the inside of the rim of the bottle. And that blood would come back to match Laura. So the bottle that Samuel had in his home was likely the item, and they matched it up with her wound, and they confirmed that the bottle created that injury. So you have the bottle, and you have the blood in the bottle found in Samuel's apartment. You also have DNA from multiple sources that were involved directly in the homicide and the rape, all matching Samuel. This is very clear and cut. This is the guy. So Samuel was either a current or a previous Missouri State National Guard. And when he was arrested, he was in uniform. And, they charged him with the murder of Laura Wynn. He, of course, continued to deny he had anything to do with her murder, but the evidence against him was about as overwhelming as you could possibly get, especially since he denied being in her apartment. He did not deny that he knew her, because they did. They had interacted before at the bar, because they were both regulars. He also did not deny that there was, a fight between the two of them, a verbal fight between the two of them that night with regards to the pool table. And he did say that she refuted his offer to buy a drink. And so what the prosecution believed is that he didn't like being showed up that way by her. And so he followed her home. And the likely scenario is that he was running up those stairs right behind her, and before she could do anything, because she had already opened the door, and he rushed in with her and then attacked her. Samuel goes on trial for the murder, and he is convicted. He is found guilty of her murder, and the jury sentences him to life in prison without parole. Now, in some point around 2007, 2008 or so, his conviction is actually overturned due to a technicality. But before he's even released, in order to if they're going to do a new trial or whatnot, they would go through the appeals process, the prosecution would, and they were able to essentially get his conviction reinstated. So he never actually went technically on a second trial. His conviction that had been overturned was just put back in place. And so, again, he is back in prison, serving a life sentence without parole. So Samuel will never be free. This was about as clear as you could possibly get. The problem, though, is that 13-year gap, why did it take so long, even though Samuel was kind of on their radar? Well, you got to have physical proof. And that they had the proof. They had it right there the whole time. They just couldn't process it. The science wasn't all the way there yet. And so that's why it took a longer period of time. So hopefully, it doesn't sound like he had been responsible for any more known rapes or murders. So hopefully he didn't kill or hurt anyone in those 13 years, but eventually he was found and captured, and he will never hurt anyone ever again. At least no one innocent. Laura Wynn battled her entire life. She was dealt kind of a bad hand at birth, and it did cause struggles in her early life, but eventually she learned to overcome those struggles. And she was very proud of herself. Her family was very proud of her. She was doing amazing. She was doing the job she really wanted to do. She loved working in this pharmacy. She loved working in the medical field. That was a passion of hers, and she got to do it. Unfortunately, she didn't get to do it for very long because one man who, for whatever reason, apparently was upset a woman stood up to him or whatever the case may be, but he had to be a monster and take her away from everyone. But in the end, Laura Wynn and her family were able to get her the justice that she very rightfully deserved. But that is it for this case. True crime, Aruni, Dooney, Dingleberry Dongs. I hope you found it interesting. As usual, if you are new here, hello, my name is Mike. I tell true crime stories here on YouTube, obviously. So please subscribe if you're into that kind of thing. I tell multiple stories a week. I also tell short form true crime stories over on TikTok. You can find the link to my TikTok in the description of this video below. It's in the link tree. You can also just search Making a True Crimerer on TikTok and you'll find me really easily. And also in the link tree below, you'll find my case list. The case list now has well over 7,100 names on it. Typically, I pick my cases I cover each time at random. However, if you are a loved one to a missing person, or maybe your loved one's been murdered and it's a cold case, it's unsolved, or you just want their story told, let me know in the email that you are a direct family member so I can make that case a priority. But that is it for this video, True Crime Maroonies. So until the next case, ta-ta. Forth noweth. I got really Shakespearean there at the end. Don't know why. Okay, bye.